Now on Spark Radio, we're joined by a very special guest, Michael Bowers, massive Sunderland fan, big YouTuber. I like to call an outstanding match reviewer, and also you've been a review on BT Sport as well, haven't you?
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago, but I like how you bigged me up there.
I mean, first of all, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Jake. Thanks for having me on here. How are you doing?
Yeah, very fine, especially after the result on Saturday. So.
Oh, I'm sure every Sunderland fan feels the same way.
We've got a nice 2-week break now, haven't we? So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Although it's going to be a massive fixture pile-up for April, mind.
Yeah,
so,
was it 9 games, isn't it?
Something like that. 8 games in a month. Wow. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's just life in League One, though, isn't it?
Well, exactly. I mean, that's one thing. I always said there was one good thing about being in League One. We don't have these stupid international breaks, and we end up getting 2 of them anyway, so it doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah. First of all, I'm going to ask, are you aiming to keep up these match reviews into the start of next season as well?
Yeah, probably. As long as people are content with watching me talk to a camera for a little bit, because, I mean, there's a lot of other YouTubers that put a lot more effort into their videos over me, because I basically just stick my face in the camera and then just kind of talk, really. But other people have editing and, you know, music timing and everything, and I can't be bothered with usually a lot of that. But as long as people want me to, I'm happy to keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've always wanted to ask you, Michael, like, what gave you the encouragement to start doing these match reviews? It's something that I've always wanted to do myself, but I've just like lost confidence as soon as I pressed the record button. And also, like, how did you feel when BT Sport contacted you and wanted it to use you for match reviews as well?
Well, I'll have to divide that question into a few. I'd recommend you go for it. If you want to do a YouTube reactions and everything, just say what you think and just put it on YouTube itself as a platform. Just be yourself, because I've recorded with a couple of other people before where they tend to not be themselves, but they're a bit reserved sometimes when they're on camera. They don't talk like how I'm talking to you right now is how I try to talk to the camera. So to answer your question, what started it? Everyone will know the true Geordie, actually, funny enough, because he's made a big name for himself now.
But he's huge now, isn't he?
Oh, I know. He's hosted tons of podcasts with so many high-profile names. Alan Shearer, just naming one of them.
Ricky Gervais recently.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't watch him as much now, but when he used to do just the Newcastle match reviews, I always found it funny because he was getting angry a lot of the time. But it got me think. He made a story about talking about how Newcastle's kind of faltering and how they should be doing better. And when I started these rash reviews, it was a period where Sunderland obviously were trying to survive in the Premier League, and to me, I felt we're underachieving as a club and not really aiming higher. So I thought, well, I'm not seeing anyone else across the YouTube platform that's actually saying this, so I thought, I'll do it and just see what happens. I'd thought about doing it for a while, and then I just stuck my face on the camera, and then since then I just haven't looked back. I've just kept on doing it.
Yeah, I guess also being a season card holder is a big bonus to you doing this as well. I mean, this is my first season with a season card in it. I think it will probably be a season to remember, let's hope, by the end.
Well, hopefully.
Secure automatic promotion. I don't want to go through the heartache of playoffs, because it's honestly a nightmare scenario, especially because the football's not great. You can tell like teams are playing with nerves, like when they're trying to get to Wembley to achieve promotion. But it's a shame, because obviously I'm going to be moving back down to London in September, which means I'll only be able to come up for like the odd home game a season. But
yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's a big commitment either way, though, because you have to commit financially, and then if you want to make the most out of your money, then you have to try and come up with the majority of games.
Yeah, I guess if I went down the match reviewing route, then I'd have to watch. Was it through the website next season?
Oh, is it iFollow, I think, is how they do it. Well, I mean, to be honest, I have some of the games I've done reviews for I haven't even seen. So basically, the way I look at it is that try and do a match review that because often in a lot of my match reviews, I tend not to talk about the actual game. I just talk about the context of it and what it means for Sunderland's season. So there was a game recently where I think it was Bristol Rovers away in the league, where McGeady scored the free kick. I think I'd watched a bit of the first half. But aside from that, I hadn't seen any of the second half apart from his goal. Yeah. But I was just going off what people were saying, that they were saying it was a comfortable win, for example. And I just talked about how big the victory was, because I think Portsmouth and Barnsley played each other that weekend, if I'm right.
Yeah.
And they got a draw themselves, and that was obviously crucial for Sunderland. So that's kind of the way I try to work at my match reviews. If I can't review the actual game, I just review the result in isolation and what it means.
Yeah. I mean, do you like to go into like pre-planning before you press the record button, or do you normally like the thoughts are there after the final whistle and you just normally go for it on the spot?
More the latter, to be honest. I know a lot of people obviously tend to put a lot of planning into it. I mean, like you with the podcast right now, you put a lot of planning into it, but I'm not very. I try to write bullet points at best, and then try and work from there. And if that's I find myself not being able to stick to those points. Sometimes the thoughts just come out and just do it, and I try to do the match reviews as quickly as possible to try and sort of get the match reaction out there first, so hopefully mine's the first one out, but also it's just the feelings of the game and the feelings of the result that's just literally happened. So I mean, it doesn't sound very professional, but that's the way I like to work. It's the way I like to do it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the main reasons I asked you on Bowers is on your Twitter handle, you've put also have autism, not afraid to admit it, but hopefully that inspires people. I mean, that just wanted me to like speak to you more, because it sounds like you're like a really sound guy, like you want to give encouragement and like want other football fans to open up about what you have.
Yeah. Well, it's not even just football fans, it's people in general, because I feel like sometimes I've seen some people classify autism. I want to be clear here, I'm not a leading expert on autism, I just happen to have a case of Asperger's syndrome, which is a form of it. But most people tend to... most is a bit harsh. I've seen some people sort of categorise it and sort of say, oh, well, these must be the traits because you have autism, so you must have this, this and this and this. And I felt like, well, I've seen a lot of people open up about various other things. You've seen yourself, mental health stigmas, for example, which I've got my own problems with mental health. But I felt like if I opened up with autism, and I feel like I inspire at least one person to talk more about it, then I feel like I've done a service and done something worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like more common, especially with like YouTubers now. I remember obviously you know who Joe Weller?
Yes.
He did one about, was it depression? And also Jam Sani, our beloved Jam Sani.
Yeah, exactly.
It went viral.
I know, the video titled Thank You, which was heartfelt.
Yeah.
I really loved it.
I mean, what gave you the encouragement to like put that as part of your Twitter handle?
That's a good question, actually. I don't know. I think I just sort of felt that I wanted to just be open with it. I wanted to put it as part of the Twitter handle so that people knew straight away, and maybe try and set an example that some people who have autism can be, I hate using this word, but normal as a quote unquote there, because I don't want people to get the impression that people with autism are everyone's on the low end of the spectrum, whereas every spectrum level's different. I consider myself quite high functioning, and I've got a lot of friends who have got autism, and some of them are a bit lower down the spectrum. Most of them are very high intelligent. Some of the most intelligent people I know have got autism, so that's kind of, so I'm probably wandered off a bit, but that's kind of the basics of it.
What I find fascinating is like a lot of people don't realise how many football fans are now showing like their autistic traits, but like that can be used as an advantage as well, talking about like how much opinions they have on like the performance, like yourself, like talking about it on the day of the game.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sometimes, if you look at it, so one thing that people with autism tend to struggle with stereotypically is the notion of eye contact, or the lack of it. So sometimes I'm holding a camera. I know, so anyone who's not can't see me, I'm trying to do some weird hand gesture looking like I'm holding the camera. But say if I'm holding it, I'm trying to look at myself on the actual footage instead of looking where the camera actually is. Yeah. So it kind of makes it look like I'm not doing any eye contact. So I try to balance it out and look every couple of seconds to where the actual camera is. And also, I try to look around just to make sure that no one's going to try and interrupt the match review, because I've got a pet peeve about that. But, if particularly on YouTube, if people are coming out about autism, try and normalise it, try and make it not even just related to football, try and make it more of a common thing that people can talk about and not be afraid because of the stigmas attached to it.
Yeah, but I guess that also like gives you just that little bit of extra love for the club, like compared to a lot of people as well. Like the club's on your mind a lot.
No, definitely. I mean, one thing I would mention, and I can't remember the details of it specifically, but a couple of years ago, I think Sunderland opened up one of the boxes for someone with autism. I think it was someone with special needs difficulties, and it was someone who was very hypersensitive to a lot of sound.
Yeah,
I don't know if you remember that.
BBC Look North, wasn't it?
Yeah, I can't remember. Was it last season or was it year before that?
It was 2 seasons ago. I don't know. I think they've still got the box now, but it was like a lot of people were commenting on Twitter about like how unique that is. Like what a brilliant feature that is to the thing.
Well, exactly. And I know Sunderland have got a lot of things wrong on the pitch and off it in terms of the football side of things, but in terms of community and in terms of engaging with people, you look at everything they did for Bradley Larry, for example. Yeah. I mean, I know that obviously we have a fan requesting to have the 6-minute applause at Wembley, I think it is, or the 6-minute chant. But what they did there for that young lad with autism, I think it was a lad, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone listening, but that just was really inspiring. And I think that kind of got me a little bit closer to the club. I mean, I'm fanatic and I'm obsessed with Sunderland anyway, but I do think that was a really well-timed gesture. That's one of the great things that Sunderland have done over the years.
I mean, obviously, like I can tell, like obviously you've taken just those brilliant advantages into your match review videos. I mean, how long have you been a season card holder for at Sunderland?
My first season as a season card holder was the 2011-2012 season. So it was the year that Bruce got sacked, and then O'Neill came in, and we got to the FA Cup quarter-final before losing to Everton. That was the first, because that was the first full season I was actually into football. I wasn't actually into it until then, because I got the impression, oh, well, why do you get paid to kick a ball around? And then since I started watching it, I've now understood completely what the fanatic is.
Because I grew up in North London, the closest team to me was Arsenal, but the main reason I chose Sunderland, obviously, because my dad's from Durham, he's a big Sunderland fan. My mum's from Roker, just up the road from here. She's a huge Sunderland fan as well. And when the stadium was getting built, do you remember the names of people on the bricks?
Yeah.
That was done for me it was my christening. It was a christening present, and I thought, as soon as I realised that was done, like, there's only one club for me at the end of the day. I mean, that will just like always remain there, no matter what.
I bet that was tested in the 2 relegations, though.
Yeah, but I think there's a difference for like liking football but being a football fan.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I was taken to a few Arsenal games at Highbury. I saw that as just like going to watch entertainment, like going to the cinema.
Yeah, you're not connected to the club and the players, so to speak. You're actually just there to watch it.
I mean, like, when I didn't really start properly following the team until, we got promoted under Keane, and it was that first season in the Prem where we finished 15th from it. You know, we stayed up that season. But before, I mean, I enjoyed playing football, but like actually being a football fan, I never quite understood it until like it was that season we went up when Carlos Edwards scored that goal
against Burnley, wasn't it? Yeah,
to secure promotion. But like that season, it just like the club was on my mind like every single day, and I couldn't get it out. If you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly. I mean, so you kind of got the similar experience as me by the looks of it. You know, you didn't get it until recently. I mean, obviously you had it a few years earlier than me, but I think I had a couple of years where I was a season card holder. And then I think it was round about when O'Neill got sacked that I actually didn't renew for the following season, because I felt that the players we had under O'Neill, I felt were under-delivering on the pitch, and I felt like, because everyone had bigged up O'Neill and this reputation he had. And bearing in mind, I hadn't seen anything of him at Villa or Celtic and Leicester. I think he was manager of both of them.
Yeah, both of them.
So I just judged him on what I saw at Sunderland, and I thought I was very underwhelmed. So typically, the season after I didn't get a season card, and we got to Wembley, which was annoying.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, bless Martin O'Neill. I mean, very experienced manager. I have a mate from London. He's a Nottingham Forest fan, and he idolises Martin O'Neill. But I think that era, the style of play, just wasn't quite up to scratch with it.
No, I didn't think so, and I felt that. I'm going to compare him a little bit to Gus Poyet here, because I saw people. I listened to the Roke Report pod, the other one they did the other day, and one of them was that Gus Poyet had absolutely dreadful football. Towards the end, yes, but the difference for me between the two of them, for instance, was, because I know people ask me how can I compare them. For Gus Poyet and O'Neill tried to set us up to be very hard to beat, but for the most part under Poyet we actually weren't conceding goals. We were actually relatively solid, and he had a much worse squad to work with, I thought. Whereas O'Neill, I felt, was trying to set us up to be hard to beat, but we still kept on conceding loads of goals. And actually, if it wasn't for Simon Mignolet that year, I think we probably would have got relegated.
Yeah, I mean, it's because I remember when Poyet first came in, it was like he had this like possession style of football. I mean, O'Neill, like he was. I would reckon him at the start, it was like a good motivator.
No, definitely.
We had like this squad of players to get us into a mid-table finish, but I think when the transfer windows came about, like both of them two just didn't quite have it in their locker.
Yeah, that's the thing, because I mean we signed, well, he who shall not be named, I'm not going to mention him, and then Stephen Fletcher in the same window, and both of them were kind of hailed as big money signings, and really, I don't know what it was. I felt like, put it this way, when O'Neill first came in, I could see there was a lot of energy and effort from the players. Now, I don't know if that's a new manager on the bounce thing, but they clearly then showed they had that in them to do it. And then the following year, it just seemed very lethargic, very slow, very laboured, and I just got the impression, maybe it's just me, I got the impression when watching the team that they were just giving 60, 70%, whereas I felt, well, come on, like, we were held at home to Newcastle and Norwich, for example, those two games in that 12-13 season at home, they were down to 10 men for over an hour, and we were lucky to get a point in both of them. And that was kind of where I started to think, are you actually doing your job properly here? Are you just like, you know, I mean, there was reports at the time, for example, that his wife was ill, I don't know what substance there is in that, but I think that when I listened to that, and I thought, well, you shouldn't really be managing Sunderland then, because for your own well-being and your wife's well-being ahead of the club's, that's got to have an effect on you. If you're a full-time manager and then you've got that on the sidelines in your personal life, how can you cope with that?
Yeah, I mean, I read it was in the Sunderland Echo, there was an article where it was like in the preparation to O'Neill's last game against Man United before he gets sacked. He didn't turn up to training until the Thursday. But I think, like, if you're a manager, you should, like, at least be on the training ground at least the day, like 4 or 5 days a week, to like properly try and engage the team leading up to a big home game. Yeah,
well, especially given it's against Man United. I know Ferguson was still there at that point, and they were running away with the league at that stage. So given that you'd have to be on your game mentally. I mean, usually you would have to anyway, but especially under Ferguson, to get anything out of Manchester United, you would have to really be at 100% from first minute to last and not let them have a sniff.
Yeah. Obviously, we don't know whether there was like personal things going on behind the scenes, like leading up to O'Neill's departure. But I'm not sure if he moved his family up here.
Maybe, I'm not sure.
No, I mean, I think he was based somewhere down south. Yeah. But I don't think, like, personally, it's gone well on like a managerial front since he had that job. I think it's like sort of gone downhill, and I think he still hasn't quite recovered, because he was a fan of the club, wasn't he?
Oh, definitely. No, I mean, I'm not gonna. Just from watching him in interviews, he seemed a very charismatic and nice guy. But I mean, it was just kind of what I think. I've just got the minority opinion on O'Neill. So everyone else is probably screaming at the at the screen or whatever they're listening to this on. But I mean, look, he's done all right. Is it Republic of Ireland he went to not long after us? He's done okay there, and then he might do well at Forest if he gets them promoted. I can't knock that. That's great, considering that the Championship is a very tight race to get promoted, and it's a very difficult league to get out of. So but that was when I started to get into Sunderland, really. I mean, I was there with Steve Bruce, but O'Neill was my first full proper manager when I was there anyway.
Yeah. On to the game on Saturday against Walsall. How would you sum up the performance from the weekend? I mean, my personal opinion, it wasn't the best, but you could tell the squad had been playing like a lot of games recently, and they were very short of match fitness. But I think the most important thing when you go into games at this stage of the season, League One, is that you come out with 3 points but not necessarily play well. Yeah,
well, that's the big thing. And I think a lot of people put it this way. How do I sum it up? First, how can I do this without swearing? The first 20 minutes was poor. And I mean, it's the typical old problem that I think a lot of teams play Sunderland, and I'm not being arrogant here when I say this, like a lot of people have said this, it's their big day, it's their cup final, and of course they're not going to just want to play Sunderland and don't care about the result. Of course they're going to want to beat us. They want Walsall are fighting for their lives down the bottom of the table. They're going to be really up for it.
I mean, it was our 4th game against them this season, was it?
Something like that, and that was the first time we'd beaten them. I was at the Walsall game down there 2-2, and that was the most mental game I'd been to in my life. But as far as Saturday was concerned, Walsall really gave it to us for the first 20 minutes, and we couldn't get anywhere near them. Their effort, intensity levels, energy levels was relentless. The way they kept on going at us was very concerning. And at one point I turned to one of my friends next to me and I said, they've got Barnsley next week. I'll be very keen to see if they play with this same level of intensity against them.
I mean, it was a surprise. I would have thought Jack Ross would have, for that game, reshuffled the squad a little bit more.
You'd think so, especially given we played Barnsley a few days earlier as well. Yeah. So really in that sense, certainly in that sense, you could tell they've played. I mean, if you think we're going to be like that now, what are we going to be like by the time we play like Southend, for instance? I mean, thankfully, to this day, I think we got a goal disallowed. And I'll ask you, do you know what on earth that was for?
I mean, I sit in the northwest corner at the opposite end, but I assumed it was like a shirt pull in the box. But seeing the replay of it, I still don't really understand what.
I don't either. I just kind of thought, well, it's probably a slight shirt pull on the keeper or one of the defenders, and the ball trickles into the net. And then
who got the final touch? Who put it in? I think it was
Power. I think Max Power.
I thought it was. I mean, it was so hard to see. I thought it was Grigg initially.
But no, I think it was Max Power. I mean, I've looked at the highlights again since, and it just looks similar to the way the actual equaliser was scored. That basically we took a shot and then it just bobbled past the keeper and just rolled into the net. So I thought, well, how can you disallow one of them and allow the other one?
Yeah. I mean, I was saying to my mates before the kick-off, like, the team he put out against Walsall, does that give an indication, and looking at the players who are on the bench, of what side he's going to start in the cup final against Portsmouth? Because was it James was rested, wasn't
something like that. I think was it Matthews left back, and then 09 was. I mean, to be fair, you can't really drop 09 from right back. He's just been too good there.
Was Dunn in the squad on Saturday? I can't quite remember.
No, I think it was Flanagan and Baldwin as the centre-half partnership.
I don't know whether there was an injury in there or he was just left.
I don't know. I mean, I've got the impression with Dunn, whenever I've watched him, that it's a difficult one because Hearts fans have said he's been excellent. But when I've watched him, I think that he's good in the air. I think he's got good aerial sense, and I think he can tower. He's got the height to tower a lot of forwards that he comes up against. My problem with him is that when he has the ball, he never looks confident with his feet. He looks like he's got like Peter Crouch legs, but at the back. Yeah. Basically, he looks like he's never. He can't get a decent touch. He can't. I mean, he can pass the ball if there's no one pressuring him, but I would worry about him if he was against somebody. And for me, Flanagan and Baldwin should be the centre-back partnership, really, considering that even when we weren't playing great, but we were keeping clean sheets and winning, they were at the heart of that almost every game. So for me, I would stick with that.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I personally thought Katz would have been left out for that game, considering he could be like a big performer. You need him like fully fit for a cup final.
Well, you think so? I mean, certainly there's a debate about what legs or lack of legs he has anymore, because I think he's 31 now, or approaching 31.
He's 30. Katz now.
Yeah, I think he's approaching 31, so you've got to think that, well, his legs aren't going to be there anymore. But to be credit to him, I think he's played the last few games consecutively. The only game he hasn't played was the Checker Trade semi against Bristol Rovers. But I think in general, you would think Katz would be the one to be left out of the team recently, just purely for his own energy levels. But I don't think you can drop him at home at the minute, because he's scored, 3-3 now after not scoring at home for 10 years.
I would argue, because he had a spell out the side, didn't he? Since he's come in the second half of the season, he's been probably our more effective player, I would say, in that squad. No,
I'd agree. Yeah. I think Cattermore's got some bite in the middle of the park, and I think I've said it time and time again. When he was out, I felt we missed that hugely. And if you look at the other midfielders like Ledbetter, I think with Ledbetter, you've got someone who can dictate things from deep. I think you've got Power, who isn't quite as tenacious as Cattermore, but you can offer something. But when Katz is in there, I just think you've got that bite, and I think he's got past the point of being sent off pretty much all the time. Watch him get sent off at Wembley now, I've said this, but he's got that sort of bite to the midfield that we need to try and dictate things and try and intimidate opponents. So I think we've been easy to play against sometimes.
I mean, the games we've got left now first of all, I'll ask you, how do you see our automatic promotion chances now with the results that went for us at the weekend and the result we had on Saturday?
Yeah, thank you to Doncaster and Gillingham, firstly. It's a hard one for me, because while mathematically it's ours to lose, I can't. I mean, it depends how much Barnsley, for example, miss Kiefer Moore, because there's no doubt that he's a huge player for them. And I don't know, were you here when Barnsley came up here? We beat them 4-2.
Yeah, I mean, that was a crazy game.
Oh, it was. But I don't know what you think. Kiefer Moore was their best player by a mile on the pitch. I mean, Barnsley played well, and they're definitely the best team that I've seen us play this season. But Kiefer Moore ran our defence riot that night, and for him to be missing for the rest of the season is a blow for them. But they've still got Coley Woodrow, Tiam, I've forgotten what his first name is, the winger for them, Cameron McGeehan, Ethan Pinnock at the back. They've still got some very good players, and I don't know if they miss Kiefer Moore as much as I hope they do, then I think we'll get second. But it just depends on. I mean, you look at it now. By the time Sunderland next play in the league, we don't play until April the 3rd, I think, when we play Accrington. Yeah. And Barnsley have Walsall, but Barnsley and Luton play 2 extra games in the run-up to that. Yeah, so
I mean, the worst nightmare scenario, Accrington, at various times have had so many problems with their pitch this season.
Did you see what it was like the other day?
Yeah.
When it was against Rochdale, like it looked more like a water park than a football pitch.
You just have that fear that game could even be rescheduled again if the weather.
I know, that'd be the 4th time it's been rescheduled this season. It's ridiculous. I mean, it was actually quite funny, because I remember when I was watching it at the Beanbag, I don't know if you were watching the Accrington, the original game away in December, and when Maguire scored, and they were talking about, calling off the guy, was like, don't you dare actually think about rescheduling this. And then when they scored, I thought, right, do it now then, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, they were on top of us, weren't they?
At that point they were, yes. Yeah. So I mean, by the time we next play them, I'm hoping that we're not too far adrift. If I had to put my hat on it, I'd still think we might finish in the playoffs, but I think we'd win it, because I know there'll be a lot of pressure on Sunderland going into the playoffs, but I do think Sunderland have dealt with big game pressure now this season multiple times, and I think they'd be used to it now, and the players should have the hunger to want to go and get promoted. But I mean, I'm hoping that Barnsley and Luton mess up and that we end up catching and overtaking both of them, but I can't see Luton dropping from here. Barnsley, 50-50 for me.
Yeah, absolutely. will the team be any different in 2 weeks' time, and who stands out that have guaranteed a place in the starting 11 in that cup final?
Well, McLaughlin definitely, because it says something that we're third in the league, and he's still been one of our most crucial players this year.
Yeah.
If I had to, I'll try and name. If I had to name a team, I think I have McLaughlin. Okay, it's a hard one for me. I'd probably go Matthews right back, and I'll get onto why in a moment. Matthews, Baldwin, Flanagan, James, and then assuming I don't know what formation it is where we play, because sometimes it tends to alternate a bit. I think we start with a 4-2-3-1, for instance. I'd probably have then Ledbetter and Katz sitting deeper, and then McGeady, and just for the benefit of the doubt, Morgan on the wings, because I thought Morgan had a good game against Walsall, and then have 09 behind Grigg. And the reason is because while I like 09 at right back, and I think he's been excellent there, I'd like to see him being pushed a bit further forward into a more advanced role. The energy, the pressing he'll give to the opposition must tear them to shreds. I mean, he scored against Portsmouth at Fratton Park, so just place him further forward. So I think that while I'd like to see 09, I'd like to see Matthews in his regular position, James as well, and 09 there, especially. Oh, hang on, no, Honeyman's playing, isn't he?
Yeah, we have to take into account he's available, isn't he? Yeah.
Okay.
That's the dilemma that a lot of fans are having at the minute. I mean, they so desperately want to see 09 be moved up into that number 10 role.
Yeah.
But I think with Honeyman as captain, technically, I wouldn't say he's the best, but he still has...
He offers something, doesn't he?
He drives the team forward.
What would you do?
I still think Honeyman, considering... Because cup finals, it doesn't matter what form you're in the league, just completely goes out the window. I think he will start in that midfield three. I think it will be Ledbetter, Katz, and Honeyman, and I think 09 will keep his place at right back, but I think he will bring James back in. I think he was on the bench on Saturday because he wants to rest him for that game. I think it just shows Jack Ross thinks Reece James is a very key player to his squad.
I think it's also because that he probably has played a lot recently, and I think maybe James was showing fatigue, because I think the side was showing a bit of fatigue towards the end of that game and the end of the Barnsley game as well. So I don't know. I think going what you've said, probably maybe James back in, and then maybe 09 right back, and then have Honeyman there, because I think that Honeyman, I don't know what your opinion on Honeyman is, but I think he divides a lot of opinion. But for me, I think that you're right. I think I agree with you. Technically, he's not our best player by any stretch, but he offers something when he's on the pitch.
There's times where, when he has returned to the side, I've not been his biggest fan of, called for him to be taken off a few times. But, now you have to, sort of take into account that it was a struggle for him when he came back from injury. He wasn't that same player. But now I think that Plymouth game at home, he's really starting to find his feet now. No,
exactly. It just goes to show that sometimes people are very quick to judge players, and I think that, one of the things that really irritates me a lot of time about football fans, although I kind of accept it, it's a football results business, is that you could judge a player after 2 games and decide, they're the bee's knees, or they're the worst player on the planet. And I think a lot of the players, but especially when you look at the likes of Honeyman, but look, 09's a good example of that, where start of the season, I think at the start of the season he was overwhelmed by playing, because with all due respect to Wickham, playing Wickham and then playing for Sunderland's a massive step up in anyone's career. But he looks a bit overwhelmed at first, and then now I think that he's starting to embrace playing for us, and he's been excellent since moving into right back.
I remember his day, he started in that Charlton game, didn't I? think he just got a bit carried away with the occasion. I think the nerves got the better of it, because it was the biggest, you could tell it was the biggest crowd.
Oh, exactly. And as well, you think that was the first game under the new ownership as well, because it felt like a while since they'd took charge, so they had all summer with them, but we hadn't played any competitive football till then.
I think 09 was the first player to be taken off that game, so, but he's still remains if I had to pick a player of the season now, he would be my player of the season. Just from the knockback he had at the start, for him to bounce back and
oh no, definitely. I don't know how young is he?
He's 23 now, I think.
Oh, okay. I was going to try and put him as young player of the season, maybe, but I don't know. If you asked who player of the season is now, I really couldn't tell you. 09's probably been the most consistent off the top of my head, because Greg could be a difference, for example. He's only been here since January, and then
it will be 09 followed by McLaughlin, I think.
Yeah, McGeady, I think, shown patches of it as well, but again, there's been games where he's gone missing. So I think McLaughlin's an excellent shout. I think back to that Doncaster away game where Doncaster, right before half-time, had 2 very big one-on-one chances, and he stood his ground on both of them. And then look what happened, we ended up winning that game, and that felt a very significant result at the time. So,
Also, was it, the big question is, I believe, was it the picture on Twitter with Chris Maguire?
Yeah, with the Checker Trade Trophy badges on his shirt.
And him, was it in like a boot, in the boots, wasn't it?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
He could just
dream.
Cast because of the injury he had, but I mean, it's getting a lot of Sunderland fans excited because he's been a key player, especially in the first half.
You know what's going to happen, don't you? I don't know about you, but I can have dreams of Chris Maguire lifting the Checker Trade Trophy and scoring the last-minute winner and just giving the big ear and all to the Portsmouth fans who've been very cocky recently. So,
yeah. I mean, on to the cup final itself. Like, I was lucky enough to go to the final against Man City 5 years ago, and that whole weekend, despite we got beat, was just probably one of the greatest weekends of my life.
No, I mean, obviously I didn't get to go because I wasn't a season card holder, and I'd felt quite cheesed off by that because I'd been to every single one of those cup games, apart from the second leg at Old Trafford, which, by the way, was the best night of my life. When we got through on penalties, when Barnsley scored, when De Gea spilled the shot into the corner, I think I've never remembered going more mental for a goal than that. Even more mental than any goal against Newcastle. That was just an incredible night. But as far as the final itself was concerned, I ended up watching it on the TV, and although it's not quite the same, so this for me is going to be significant because it's my first trip to Wembley, so I'm really looking forward to it. But
yeah, I mean, I've been a few times, a few England games, a few Spurs games with my mates, and the atmosphere, like, for them is just completely a different bread and butter compared to a cup final. And the best that still remains to this day at Wembley was the final in 2014. What I found fascinating about that, I don't remember seeing a single Man City fan until after the final whistle. It felt like just the whole of Wembley way before the game was just pure red and white.
I know, well, I can imagine. I mean, Man City fans in general have sort of stuck up for Sunderland a lot. I think that the final, a lot of people said that apparently a lot of Man City fans had, I don't know, what were Man City fans like? Did they make much noise during the game, apart from when they scored?
Yeah, I mean, any team in a cup final, when they do score, like, the noise is deafening. Like, but
same with us then. I can imagine when Barini...
It was a bit of a weird time because they were just getting over Manchester, because a lot of the fans I was speaking to on the day were very happy. Sorry, weren't too happy. They were like still a bit... How can I put it? They missed Mancini a lot. They were surprised that Mancini got the boot from the job, and like they still were unsure whether Pellegrini was that man to like take them forward in the right direction. Yeah,
I mean he won the Premier League that year as well, didn't he? But obviously that was mainly because Liverpool had threw it away pretty much. So
Pellegrini was like fairly unknown before he came to England, didn't it?
Yeah, well, he's at West Ham. He's doing all right at West Ham now, to be fair to him, but I wonder if that's his level rather than a club like what Man City have got, because their expectation would be to at least compete for, if not win, the Premier League, and then sort of go out in go for the Champions League a bit more. But I mean, I'll ask you this then: what was the atmosphere like at Wembley? It looked mental when Barini scored on the TV, but I can imagine being there is a completely different thing.
I mean, my dad said to me at half time, it's the best toilet trip at a football match he's ever had in his life. Because he was just like reliving the moment. We're 45 minutes away, but I was like reassuring him it's going to feel like the longest second half of our entire lives.
I remember watching on TV, and because I'd been through a really, really bad week then, and I thought that, can we just win this? It'll make my week feel fantastic if we beat Man City. And I remember at half time, the thing that always keeps flashing back to mind for me is when Barini was offside quite clearly for me in the build-up, but he had that one-on-one chance where if he just took a shot earlier, instead of Vincent Kompany tackling him, he would have made it 2-0 probably. And I thought, had we scored that would have really got my hopes up for it, because even at 1-0 I thought, I still can't see us winning this.
Yeah, I mean, the big debate amongst Sunderland fans was Yaya Touré's first one. Was it a cross? Was it a shot? I mean, still remains to this day.
I honestly don't know. I mean, I'm getting a bit tired of people saying... I mean, I'm in a minority on this. I thought, how's that not a shot? But I think maybe it was the way that he struck the ball. It looked like he didn't expect to score it. So in that sense, it was either lucky or it was a mishit cross that just happened to find the back of the net. But I remember watching that game, though. As soon as he scored that, I thought, right, City have got their tails up. They're going to win this game. But hopefully this time it's a different outcome. Hopefully, bearing in mind we're playing Portsmouth, who are not Manchester City quite clearly in any sense.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of cup finals overall for Sunderland, was that like the first big one you remember?
Yeah,
being a supporter of the team.
Yeah, probably. like I said, I mean, that final was one I'd have took relegation that year if it meant winning that game. Because that final, I just thought that was the best chance I thought I was ever going to get to see Sunderland winning a major trophy. And look, don't get me wrong, if we win the Checker Trade, I'm going to be buzzing that we've won, but not because we've won the Checker Trade trophy, but because I've seen my team win at Wembley.
Yeah, I mean, I want us to obviously win it, but like come out of it saying, I hope that's the last time we ever play in that tournament ever again.
Exactly. After this season, I hope our first team's never involved in the Checker Trade trophy ever again in our existence.
Yeah.
Ever. I can't bear the thought of being in this league another season. So please, Sunderland, if you're listening to this, or anyone, please don't make us go through another League One year.
Yeah, so, I mean, in terms of memories for cup finals for me, I mean, I'm going to count semi-finals in this one as well. I mean, I remember we have friends who lived in Manchester. I was taken up the weekend. We were playing Millwall.
Yes.
And this was a period where I liked football, but I wasn't like properly into it. Like I liked a lot of like the big players around.
Best ways you liked it, but not in love with it.
Yeah, like Thierry Henry, Ronaldinho. But like, I don't think I was like. Obviously, I would still like feel the effects if Sunderland got beat because it showed up on my dad. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't really like a proper football fan at the time. But I remember, like, my dad was just absolutely gutted that we'd lost that game. With the fact that we were one game away from, we would have played Man United in the final.
Yeah, Tim Cahill scored, didn't he?
Yeah, he scored against us a few times.
I thought you were going to swear there, actually. I wouldn't have blamed you, Tim.
No.
I remember, just quickly on Tim Cahill, I remember the cup quarter final against Everton under O'Neill at Goodison. Yeah. Remember where Bardsley scored that rocket?
Yeah.
Like, I was insane. But one of my friends before they scored, said, "Oh, Tim Cahill hasn't done anything. He hasn't scored in a while." And honestly, and as seconds later, 1-1, I was literally ready to throttle him round the neck. Honestly, I don't ever want anyone saying anything of like. Every time I go to the stadium, for example, I see, I don't know, Sunderland are unbeaten against Plymouth Argyle in so many attempts. Like, are you daring us to lose here? Please don't mention anything like that.
I mean, I thought that was a very, very good Everton team though at the time we were playing. I mean, in the replay they just completely bossed us in that game.
Yeah, I mean, I was happy with the replay when we got it because I thought we've got a chance at home of really getting them. But I think they probably had the motivation of playing Liverpool in the semis had they beaten us. Whereas, I mean, for us, don't get me wrong, playing Liverpool at Wembley would have been huge, but it would have been bigger for Everton probably.
Yeah, I mean, we're now going to move on to the club as a whole?
Yeah,
this
sure.
Season. Going forward, what would you say needs to be done? Like, what's the next step in the current ownership? Let's like disregard what division we're in next season. What do you feel the board need to do in terms of like recruitment to like take it up the next level from when they first started, from when they first took over?
Good question. It's obviously for me a bit difficult to sort of disregard the league grading because I mean that depends. I'll look at it both scenarios. If we're in League One, I know I've probably completely ignored half your question here, but if we're in League One, sign players that are going to be world beaters for League One. And I think that it depends because I think Stuart Donald has said that. I mean, for example, I went to an event at Victor's last week in Sunderland, and it was to talk a bit about mental health. But Stuart Donald was there talked for about an hour and a half, and we were sort of talking about what the budgets for the league and so on. So I think that he mentioned that we've probably got a bit of parachute money from this season, and then we'll have all of next year's parachute money because I know next year's is about 10-12 million, something like that.
I mean, are you in strong contact with Stuart on Twitter or?
I try to avoid talking to him too much.
I mean, he has got a lot on his.
Oh, I know. I mean, and I know that there are some Sunderland fans who, have genuine concerns for Stuart, but there are some morons on there who basically feel the need to at him every time something's wrong. But as far as what he needs to do, I think
sometimes I don't really like how he copes with all the pressure.
I don't know. I mean, as soon as you find out he's on Twitter, I mean, it's great for us because we can access him fairly easily. But for him, he must drive his hair out for the amount of stuff that was, for example, being tweeted at him before we signed Will Grigg. You would think like, "Oh, you're a fraud," and all this, that, and the other. I'm like, shut the hell up. Yeah, just seriously.
He made that promise in the end.
Well, exactly. And granted, we had to probably overpay, but you take your pin. The way I look at it, signing Will Grigg, for example, which kind of links back to what we need to do is. If we're signing Will Grigg now, if we're, say worst case scenario and we don't go up, we should have a fully fit Will Grigg for a season in League One. And if we're in League One next year and Will Grigg's fit, he'll score probably 25-30 goals next year. So build players that can sort of help him and build a team around him for next season in League One. If we're in the Championship, try and build a couple of mistake-free centre-halves or at least as much as you can, on a budget that we're going to have. As far as taking the club forward, I think probably... Oh, it is a hard one. I think it probably try and just keep... Sounds cliched, but keep progressing. Because I don't know about you, but I can't knock anything that they've done. But apart from maybe the Parasite comment from Charlie Methven, but they've since acknowledged that was wrong. And then apart from that, I can't think of much else that they've actually done wrong since they've come in.
Yeah, I mean, considering this is like the best, because we've had a very, very bad last 2 years, like financially. Like there'll be a lot of income into the club, considering like the stuff that's been going around with the whole Netflix thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it'll be just it'll benefit financially going into maybe not necessarily in terms of transfers, but just as the club in general. So just
no, exactly, because then we're on a better infrastructure off the... I mean, you look, for example, we were paying something like £1,000 for plastic plot plants or something. It was something daft like that, and I can't even... And I just think, what are we doing? Seriously? So I think that I think the big thing is that next year, for example, if we can get some... Because Oviedo, for example, doesn't seem to be playing much recently. So if you get someone like him out the door, straight away, that's a massive amount of wages that you're saving per week. And it looks like we're finally managing finances a lot better. I mean, you look at the Netflix thing, it's going to be more global recognition, because Netflix is a global business around the world. And Sunderland have probably got a lot more recognition from non-Sunderland fans because of that documentary. Yeah,
I just hope season 2 gets commissioned now, especially because we've got Wembley coming up.
Oh, exactly.
Well, so, yeah.
You know, I mean, I know they're developing season 2, so I'm just hoping it's got a happier ending. I mean, season 1 had a relatively happy ending given what had happened, but I know global recognition. I think that.
Personally, I felt that the last episode of season 1 could potentially even be the first episode of the next season.
It could do, yeah, because I mean the whole of that was pretty much around that 3-0 Wolves game, and then obviously it was about the transition from Short to Stuart Donald, Methven, and everyone. So it just depends. I mean, what they're doing now is, I mean, let's no mistake, the owners are going to be here. One of them objectives is to make money and make a profit, and that's fine. I've got no problem with that. That's what you're ultimately in business for, to try and make profit. But they're also, I'd like to hope that they can get I want them to get the balance right of making profit, but that doesn't come at the expense of being football fans. Get the nice balance between the two, and I know that's harder as you go up the leagues, but make a nice balance between the two of them, and I don't think many people could have cause for complaint.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the season, a lot of fans will think like it'll be a good time to like contact Stuart Donald on Twitter about where the club's going to be going next, what things are going to happen in the future, but my person, it will be so hard to get in touch with Stuart Donald, because as soon as that last game ends, the preparation for next season starts.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, and like he'll be just on his phone like throughout the summer in terms of like transfers and things. What
do you think that we need to do? I mean, even like I said, whatever league we're in terms of making actual progress on and off the field.
Yeah, I mean, if we're promoted, then I still like, although there's a strong togetherness in the squad in terms of like taking it up to that next.
We need to be a bit more quality, wouldn't we?
Yeah, I mean, no regards to like the players who've already got there, who have come through the academy, like Honeyman, Gooch, but football now is all about how can we improve on what we've already got.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the gap between League One and the Championship, for me, is the biggest gap out of the top 4 English leagues. I think that the top-end Championship, bottom Premier League, for example, difference between maybe Norwich and Huddersfield probably isn't that much. The difference between whoever's bottom of League One, like, say, Wimbledon and Bury, for example, probably isn't that much. But if you look between, say, us and probably, well, I don't know, well, Wigan, there probably isn't that much. But, you know what I mean? Like, the gap between... If we're going to compete in the Championship, we need to spend quite a bit of money. But I mean, obviously it's about spending well, and it just depends on what the club's aim is next year, especially if we're in the Championship, because in League One we'll know what our aim would be, and that's to win the league or at least get promoted. Whereas in the Championship, and I asked Stuart Donald this on Thursday gone, like last week, what the realistic aim would be if we're in the Championship, and I think he mentioned idealistically just off the playoffs. And I know he's probably saying that, obviously, as the owner of the club. He's not going to say, oh, I'm expecting us to be terrible. You know, I think we'll be glad if we could avoid relegation. But for me, like, I think that if we're competitive every game, then I think around a respectable mid-table finish is probably...
But he'll know, like, on the back of his mind, there's still, like, a lot done to justify what he said.
No, exactly. Yeah. I mean, you know, I mean, let's not make no mistake. I think Stuart Donald, I'll view the season as a failure if we don't get promoted. I can't think of many Sunderland fans that won't. But it won't. I will not disregard everything that the behind the scenes they've done. They've had to do a lot since coming into the club. Look, I mean, I heard a story somewhere that Jack Ross, for example, only had 11 first-team players when he started out. So maybe I'm not giving him as much credit as he probably deserves just on that alone. You look at the amount of change that's happened at the club so quickly, and the biggest thing that had to change for me, and Kieran Brady has said this time and time again, hence why I agree with almost everything he says, is that there was a change of culture at the club needed, because I felt there was a lot of players there. For example, last season, even with Lee Camp, for me, that squad shouldn't have gone down. There should have been enough in that team to finish ahead of Bolton, Burton and Barnsley and all that, because I didn't rate any of those sides. But you look at it, I think there was a culture where, everything's too difficult, or Sunderland's the impossible job to manage, or we'll come up and pick our paycheck and then look like we're half care, half give a monkeys. And then this season, you couldn't say that not one player in that squad hasn't tried.
Absolutely. I mean, personally, I think in the summer we'll know a lot more about Jack Ross and what sort of players that he feels can take the club into like that next level. Because it's like, he was appointed around about, was it July time last year?
Something like that.
But now it's like a full planning in terms of pre-season, what sort of
players exactly. He knows the squad that he's got. You'll know what. I mean, where would you say, if just hypothetically for a minute, say Sunderland were promoted to the Championship, where would you strengthen the most in the squad?
Where would I strengthen the most? I would go for the midfield. Yeah, I still think we need like more players in there that can just find the striker, like get the ball into the box, like move the ball a lot
Link
quicker.
Midfield to attack quicker.
Yeah. Players that can add a lot of pace into the team and like technical flair. I think if you had Ledbetter in there, I think you could have someone who can dictate things from deep. Obviously, he's a deeper midfielder. I think we probably could do with at least one very quick winger. Because I think McGeady's a Championship level player, but the one thing he isn't, he's not fast. He's not like, and Gooch, for example, I think is really, really fast. He's rapid, but his final product and his decision making is terrible sometimes. I mean, you would think like in terms of like the older ones like McGeady and Ledbetter, like if we are promoted, would you say they'll become more of like squad players next season?
I think Ledbetter would. I think McGeady, I mean, again, it depends for me what our objective is. If our objective is to stabilise in the Championship, I think McGeady's good enough to do that. I think Ledbetter to an extent probably is good enough to do that. I think the biggest, but I would say that Flanagan and Baldwin, for example, I think would be squad players. I think that Flanagan, I think, has been class this year. I think he's been really good. But I think... So Flanagan maybe could make the step up to the Championship. I think Baldwin would drop to the bench because while I really rate Baldwin for League One, I think he's been very good this year in general. He's always got that one clanger in him. There's always a mistake waiting to happen occasionally. So I think that you would need a tall, physical, dominating centre-half. I want someone with a bit of muscle, a bit of height that's intimidating.
I think it's weird with centre-half because I feel like when they've been part of a team that's achieved promotion the following season, that like when they get like pre-season under their belt, like the following season they become even more better than what they actually like they develop.
Do you mean sort of like the adrenaline of getting promoted enough to at least carry you for the first few months of the season? You look at how well, for example, I think
Harry Maguire played in League One with Sheffield United, didn't he? So
yeah, that's true. I mean, you look at like Wigan, for example, this year. I mean, I think Wigan started fairly well this year, if I'm right, in the Championship, and then they're now like just looking over their shoulder for in terms of staying up.
Yeah, what I just want like the fans to, if we are promoting it, this is if.
Yeah, it's a big if. There's still a long way to go yet.
We'll both look stupid if we don't go at this point. But it's a case of like with the position we're in, we have to take just each game as it comes next season.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I think that, I mean, I'll quickly say that I think Charlie Meffin, I was listening to one of the podcasts earlier this season, and he mentioned that they've got plans for if they do or don't get promoted. So obviously this is hypothetical here. But if we do go to the Championship, I think any fan expecting, I'm not trying to be disrespectful here, but any fan expecting back-to-back promotions, I think needs to rein their expectations in a little bit. Don't get me wrong, I'd love it if we were to do it, but I think that you've got to look at how much we'll be looking to spend. You've got to bear in mind Huddersfield and Fulham look like at this point that they're down. And then say it's Cardiff, for example, who go down with them. The three teams that come down from the Premier League have got a much higher financial pedestal than us to compete, although we'll have a bit of parachute payment money.
Yeah.
That's only about 10, 15 million at most. It might even not even been that. So we've got to know our place at the moment. We're still going to be a newly promoted club from League One, and for a Championship, which is a much tougher division than League One is, I think people need to realise that this is going to take time. And I think if we do get promoted, I wouldn't expect to be. Ultimately, long term, I want us to go up to the Premier League, but I wouldn't expect that for at least 2 or 3 seasons.
I mean, it won't be like a big transition. Obviously, there won't be as many signings as there were last summer, but it'll be like
a few key marquee players. Yeah, we need that. I think we probably again at least one physical centre back. Probably because Will Grigg's got a questionable championship record, so it just depends if we could get someone and attract someone who would score goals in that league, or if we happen to take a chance on someone who would actually do it. But it just depends. You're right. There's not going to be as many signings, I wouldn't think, unless there's a mass exodus of players going out. Because obviously last summer there had to be a load of signings. We were down to the very bare bones for the squad. It was utterly ridiculous what the state of the squad was in last year. But this year there'll obviously be, if there's a core there and you had a few key players in key positions, I see no reason why we can't compete very well in the Championship, even if we're not anywhere near the promotion spots.
Yeah, completely agree. We're now going to move on to some Twitter questions.
Okay.
At Joe Hay, what was it like doing the Premier League Tonight reviews for BT Sport?
Okay, I actually looked at this question, and he sent kind of a few different sub-questions to it.
I think there's 3.
Yeah. Well, the first one, I think that it was, a few years ago I was actually writing for Roker Report, and it was the year that we had Moyes. So, yay, great time to actually, great things to write about. I thank Roker Report first and foremost if anyone's listening to give them my chance, because I think that I liked actually writing for them. But when I was there, they actually got a couple of contacts by BT Sport and asked if there was any Sunderland fans that wanted to send in like quick 30-second reviews after the Sunderland games. So I got asked if this was up my street, since at that point in 2016 I'd already had my YouTube channel up for about 9 months or a year or so. So I got asked, do I want to do that? And I thought, go on then, why not? So I just started getting into the habit of sort of sending them in every time.
I mean, it's more common now, isn't it?
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think it's still going now. I mean, obviously, we're not there yet. Yeah. So
I mean, like, one of the YouTubers that would like, because I see myself doing this sort of thing one day, one of the YouTubers that gives me inspiration, and that is, was it Jack Reeve from Talk Norwich City?
Yes, I watch that content all the time. I think the podcasts are excellent. I think that the way that he looks like he's at home in front of the camera every time, and between I don't know him and Chris Reeve. I don't know if you watch the Talk Norwich City podcast.
I mean, it's like a camera's not even there.
Exactly, they're literally just like talking, and they've got some very high profile guests. So they've had Russell Martin when he was club captain of Norwich. Yeah. They've had Grant Holt, who's obviously a Norwich legend.
Darren Huckabee, Dean Ashton,
exactly.
People like that. Yeah.
You know, they had Angus Gunn when he was there last season. So I'm amazed by what they've managed to achieve, and hope, you know, I mean, I used to try and do podcasts on YouTube, and they weren't very good quality, I'll happily admit that, but they look so much fun to be a part of. And I don't usually listen to non-Sunderland podcasts, but that's an exception where I think it's so well done, so well organised, the topics are always on point, the banter's great as well. I love watching Talk Norwich City ones every single time.
I mean, in terms of like media surrounding the club, in terms of like the fans, what would you say would you like to see done? Like, what, any like new features do you reckon that fans should add?
That's a hard. What you mean, like working as in at the club side of things?
Yeah, like what would you like to see more done in terms of like discussion of the club in terms of the fans for like YouTube content, for example?
It's a hard one, that. I don't know. It's quite difficult because a lot of things are covered already. You've got podcasts going up on YouTube, like Rock Report, Wise. I mean, I know Wise Men Say, for example, aren't on YouTube, but they have a lot of content there. I'd like to see a bit more I mean, me personally, I'd like to see more collaborations among Sunderland YouTubers. So, I mean, I'm good with friends with Nathan, who's Mackham FC. Obviously, I've met Jam Sarni a couple of times as Mad Mistake as well. Sometimes it'd be nice, and I appreciate that it's time-consuming. We've all got lives. Jam Sarni, in particular, lives in Blackpool, so that obviously for him to come up here to do podcasts, for example, that would be something that, or collaborations, that would take him a 3-hour drive to get up here and then 3-hour drive back.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I messaged Jam Sarni on Twitter, like, I hope to get him on here. I mean, he's willing to do it, but it's just a case of like.
Oh, exactly. It's timing, isn't it? You know, absolutely. You have to let me know when he's coming on. Yeah, I want to go on as well. I've always wanted to try and just have a nice discussion with him, but
he's going to Wembley though, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. I mean, actually, I'll ask you that while on it. How did you find the whole Ticketmaster thing to And obviously the subject of who deserves tickets and whatnot.
I had a feeling it was going to cut. I mean,
yeah.
I'll try to...
We can't not talk about it, Manji. Come
on. Personally, I think the club could have handled it a lot better. I think Stuart Donald would admit that himself. I think, like, if we are potentially... If it comes to playoffs and we get to the playoff final, then I think he would potentially want to push for like a new route in terms of like getting tickets to Wembley. But in terms of like, I mean, I think 90% of the fans go into Wembley will not know who they're going to be sitting next to, because it was a case of, was it one season card, one ticket, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, pretty much the way. I mean, when I did Ticketmaster, I agree with you. I think that the way that it was dealt with could have been better, because I assumed it was going to be queuing at the ticket office for hours and hours. And another thing Stuart Donald said at this talk last week was that the EFL kind of governed who they could sell tickets to, what the quantity was, basically the whole structure of selling tickets. And apparently that we're very short-staffed, much more so now at the ticket office. So I can kind of get why they did Ticketmaster, especially since that's going to be linked with Sunderland quite heavily next season. But I think that you saw yourself, a lot of people had difficulties. I mean, did you have problems booking your tickets on it?
I mean, I got up at 8 o'clock in the morning to do mine.
That's dedication.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was more difficult if you wanted to specifically choose where you wanted to sit. I mean, I felt like the system on that front took longer because there were so many people on the website.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, there would have been thousands of people in one go.
I just came to the decision of I'll just let the system pick for me, and luckily I got 6 rows from the pitch. So.
Well, I think I've got 3 rows from it.
Wow.
Which is so, because I don't usually like being by pitch side, but I'll happily tolerate it if it means going to Wembley. Because the thing I found most annoying was I had to book. Me and at least 4 other people are going together, and the thing was that, I mean, registering on Ticketmaster I thought was a nightmare, because I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know how it was meant to be structured. I had to read the article explaining it about 3 or 4 times before I finally got my head around it. Yeah. I mean, in terms of buying the tickets, I didn't have much of an issue with it, but I saw a lot of people did, and there was a lot of like, oh, there's errors on this page, please come back later. And then obviously you don't want to do that, because by the time you do come back, the tickets might be gone.
Yeah. We're now obviously going to be reaching the final part of this podcast.
Yeah, sure.
How's your weekend going to pan out? Well, like, what day are you travelling down?
Mine's not as glamorous as other people's. I've got a few people who are going down on the weekend, going down by Covent Garden. I wish I was, but I'm going down there and back on the day.
Oh, right.
We've booked a coach with a coach company called Zelo, which is who we're going with.
Where are they based, like?
I don't know. I wish I'd looked at it.
A certain branch.
Yeah, I don't know. I know for this particular coach journey, they're offering directly from the Stadium of Light to Wembley, and I looked at the reviews that they've got, and I think about 87% of upper 200 odd reviewers said it was fantastic, it was excellent. So, I mean, our coach doesn't leave the Stadium of Light till 10 to 7. So I can only assume that we're not going to be stopping, because we're not supposed to get to Wembley till about 1:30, based off the Zelo website and estimated journey times. So we're going down on the day. I'll probably just like fill up a bunch of snacks and everything, and then just sort of look at fill up a bunch of snacks and just scoff them on the day.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually going down the Saturday evening. I get into London about 9 o'clock, so the first thing I'll be heading straight over to Covent Garden. So.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, I mean, I hear a lot of people love doing it. I mean, I wish I could get the chance to experience it.
I mean, the last time when we got there, I was 17, so just under the drinking age. So.
Oh, how was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realise until the next day how actually big it was. Like, I thought, you hear the rumours, like, go, well, what's that, rumours on Twitter at first, like, oh, there's loads of Sunderland fans in Covent Garden. I was like, yeah, but it's probably, like, not, but until you see the pictures of it.
I mean, I saw that it literally, if you went to Covent Garden that day, there wasn't barely any room to stand whatsoever.
Yeah. What sort of game do you reckon Pompey will bring?
Relying on one of our players to get sent off and winning from there. No, seriously. I'll start by saying, when we played Portsmouth in December, I think it was, at the League of Fratton Park, I wasn't that impressed with them. I mean, obviously they beat us 3-1, but that was largely down to the fact that we had Glenn Leuven sent off, and we had a penalty given against us, neither of which I thought were the correct decision, looking back on it. But, I mean, obviously cup final's different, isn't it, to a league game? It's bound to be different. I think Portsmouth are one of the few teams that are actually okay in League One. I think they'll probably bring a bit of physicality. They'll look to get pace down the wings. which is what a trend of a lot of League One teams, and really go at us the first few minutes. So I think it's definitely going to be a very open final. I can't see Portsmouth sitting back and defending and then trying to hit us on the break. I think they'll go for it.
Yeah. So to wrap things up, Bowers, take it away. What's going to be your starting 11 for the final, and what's the score going to be?
Okay, I'm glad you've asked me this, because I can give another starting 11 that's more accurate. Okay. McLaughlin in goal, 09 right back, Baldwin, Flanagan and James to complete the back four. Assuming we're going with a 4-2-3-1 here. Ledbetter and Cattermole holding, McGeady, Morgan, and then Honeyman behind Grigg. However, if we're going 4-4-2, that's a completely different thing, because obviously White came on against Walsall and, whether bad touch or not, help assisted Grigg to get the winner. So, no, actually, no. I'll stick with the team I've put out. That's going to be my team for the final.
Bowers, absolute pleasure having you on Spark Radio.
Pleasure. Hopefully do it again soon. Yeah. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, man. Cheers.
Good,
that was great, that.
1 hour 29. Few seconds to dip out, but that's...
No, that's fine. It's like pretty much an hour.